in the midst of suffering, in the midst of tragedy, in the midst of chaos, in the midst of all things feel like they're coming apart, we can find rest because our God is the same today as he was yesterday, as he will be tomorrow. He is never changing. And even though our circumstances have changed, his character has not.
Welcome back to the Nexus Church Planting Podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Estes. One of the hardest things you'll ever do in ministry is walk with someone through a grief that has no explanation and no easy resolution. Today's conversation is about exactly that, and it comes from someone who has lived it, not just studied it. My guest is Matthew Efird. Matthew is a bivocational pastor, business owner, and author of Even Though We Will, the story of his son Noah's diagnosis with Trisomy 13 and the 57 hours they had with him after he was born. Matthew now speaks and trains pastors and leaders across the country on how to walk with people through grief in the church and in the marketplace. I met Matthew through my wife, who first had him on her own podcast, and I've been grateful ever since to know his story and the tools that have come out of it. Today, we're going to talk about his story, what it means to stay present with people who are suffering, and what Matthew has learned about ministering to grieving families, including some of the hardest conversations he's ever had. Matthew, welcome to the podcast.
Andrew, man, I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you for the chance to share.
Matthew, I'm so grateful for the introduction to you, was grateful for just some of the tools and resources that kind of came out of your book that you had shared with me, and really look forward to just diving into your story today. But before we get into any of that, we'd just love for you to introduce yourself more fully to our audience, to somebody who may not know who you are, your family.
Sure. Matthew Efird, unapologetically a follower of Jesus Christ. Outside of my relationship with Jesus, the best decision I ever made was marrying my high school sweetheart. My wife Hannah and I have 4 boys, an 8-year-old, would-be 6-year-old, 5-year-old, and 3-year-old. I have 3 businesses that I manage, and I was a bivocational pastor for a decade in college and a little bit out of college, and served in that role, loved to serve in that role. Felt called to step out of vocational ministry for a period of time as our family was growing, as our businesses were growing. And earlier this year, in the time of this recording, I wrote a book, and I wrote about our second son, Noah. Again, he would have been 6 at the time of this recording. We learned of his diagnosis in September of 2019 that he was sick. And it was our 12-week ultrasound appointment, and he was diagnosed with Patel syndrome, which is trisomy 13. It's akin to Down syndrome. It's a extra 13th chromosome, and it is a lethal diagnosis. And so we spent the next 6.5 months grieving a diagnosis before our son was ever born, right? It's kind of what we consider anticipatory grief. So we're grieving his diagnosis while he's still here. He's growing. And then he was born March 7th of 2020, and he passed 57.5 hours later on March 9th of 2020.
Wow, man. Yeah, I can't even imagine some of that. We'll kind of continue to unpack some of that stuff, but being able to, I know that you do a little bit of either coaching or training specifically for pastors and leaders, and just how to navigate some of the grief process, and we'll dive into that a little bit. But I would love to just kind of unpack a little bit more of your story as you are, kind of getting that awful news. And I remember just reading in your book as you're talking and calling funeral homes of planning the death of your son who's about to be born.
Yeah,
and it was just some of the weight of what that looks like. I just couldn't even imagine and put myself in your shoes of just losing a child and having that terminal type of a diagnosis even before the kid's born. Take us back to just kind of that season in your life from ultrasound moving forward.
Yeah, so we went into our ultrasound appointment just like everything was normal, right? We're in our mid-20s at this time, or late 20s, I guess, and we have an 18-month-old at home. Our friend group, went to the University of Georgia, go Dogs, by the way, and had a great campus ministry group that we were a part of there. Had a great church that we were a part of that I served out on staff. Had this incredible community of a couple hundred people, really. At the end of the day, it's a couple hundred people that we were friends with. Not super close with all of them, but we're friends. Seems like everybody kind of married, you met somebody at college and married, and we were tons of weddings early in our marriage that we were in and going to. It was a very fun season of life. We looked around, we went into that doctor's appointment, and only thing that I was praying for and knew to even think of was I just want to see a heartbeat, right? We had seen a heartbeat 6 weeks earlier, 5 weeks earlier at our previous appointment. We were very excited. So we brought our 18-month-old along with us because it was like, hey, you get to see baby brother or baby sister. At that time, we didn't know. You get to see them on screen. Like, how cool is that? And our ultrasound technician started doing the exam. He has a heartbeat. It's a strong heartbeat. Like, praise the Lord. And she starts measuring the back part of his neck, and she's measuring it over and over and over again. And looking back now, we notice that. But in the moment, as we're just excited, our 18-month-old's getting a little stir crazy. He's tired of being in that little room. It was fun to see the pictures, and then it's too abstract for him. So he's wanting to climb on me. He's wanting to climb on Hannah. It's just kind of chaotic. Anybody who's got young kids, they remember. So we go into the waiting room, and that little waiting room that many of your audience or the folks in your church, they've sat in that waiting room and they've been giving a diagnosis that they were not expecting. And it's crushing. It's confusing. It throws you in a tailspin. Our doctor walked in and she said, Matthew and Hannah, there's some abnormalities on your ultrasound. And Andrew, I didn't hear a lot after that. She talked about trisomy diagnosis. The thickness of the neck, the thing that our ultrasound technician kept measuring is when it's outside of a certain range, like if it's too thick, it's a very, very telltale sign of like, hey, this is what's going on. And so we got genetic testing. We waited about 10 days to get the response back from that. Normally it takes several weeks. They rushed it. We got it back. It was 7 or 10 days later. Our doctor called us. Hannah and I and Walker were standing out on the back porch. And she said, yes, your son has trisomy 13. And it's a complete diagnosis, meaning it's impacting every cell in his body. It's not a partial. It's not going to be isolated to one part of his system. So we started meeting with specialists. We started meeting with doctors. It felt like we were going once or twice a week throughout the pregnancy. We wanted to make sure that he was okay. We had to make sure that Hannah was okay. A normal thing that happens in a trisomy diagnosis, either 13 or 18, those are the two that are most common, is it's a stillbirth. And so there's a lot of care that has to be provided for mom to make sure that her health is protected as well. So went through the process. Noah was very active and moved a lot, so it was a huge blessing. But man, in that season, that 6.5-month season, there was this kind of fog. We entered in a little bit of the fog of grief that I write about and talk about. And it became like little things became somewhat overwhelming. So the day-to-day functionality, managing an 18-month to 2-year-old at home became a big deal. Like God's designed me as a visionary. So I provide that role in my organizations. I love to do that. In this season of my life, I did not have that. Looking forward months, years down the road, decades down the road, I could not at all. There was none of that. It was a lot of, hey, I've got to get my feet on the floor and get out of bed today. And like a shower today is going to be a win. Go into the office and collecting some checks at the office is going to be a win. Like being on a 30-minute staff call is going to be a win today. And that's going to be kind of it. So it was a lot of re-evaluating myself. Like, I'm a pastor and I'm helping lead in a congregation. So I'm serving as an associate pastor at this time. And I've said from stage maybe hundreds of times at this point in my time speaking at conferences and events and small groups and from stage, and said, it's okay to not be okay, but it's not okay to stay there. And I still believe that. But Andrew, I'd never in my life been not okay until this happened. And I found myself like, oh, okay, this is what it means to not be okay. This is what it means to be broken. This is what it means to suffer. This is what it means to grieve. This is what it means to have your life turned upside down. Hannah had, when we were at that doctor's appointment and in September, when we heard that abnormalities word, she had to get some genetic testing. And I remember picking Walker up and, 18-month-old, right? Super fun for them to walk and run, like all the fun newness of life as a parent and as a little kid. But in that moment, I was like, nah, you're not going to walk across this parking lot. Like I'm going to carry you. I'm going to pick you up. I'm going to carry you and I'm going to put you in the truck and I'm going to get you buckled up. And I did. And I sat in the front and I put my head on my steering wheel and I just wept. And it was something breaking deep, deep within me of I am fully broken here. And there's emotions as a man, like I don't speak for every man by any standpoint, but I can speak for myself. There were emotions in me that I felt that I never knew I could feel, right? And there was a fear that came to me in this moment of, we're 12 weeks into this pregnancy and he's not here. And I've not had to experience the loss of him yet. And it's already hurting this bad. Like I am in trouble. I still remember thinking that I am in trouble. And we went home. We had some friends, our community group, just our family, some distant friends that lived outside of the area that we were living at the time that knew that we were pregnant and knew that we were going in for an appointment. And that evening, I went outside on that same back porch and started making phone calls. And that was one of my first big mistakes that I made, was I tried to be the point person to communicate out to everybody in my life. And that was not a good role for me. Came back in an hour and a half later and told Hannah, I can never do that again. That was way too much for me to relive this diagnosis that we've just received. It's way too raw. I have not processed this at all. How can I then communicate this out to everyone? That was a huge mistake. But what I learned early on is I had to figure out how to process things that were going on inside of me, right? The thoughts, the fears, the frustrations, the concerns, the confusion. In a way that I did that is I moved and I wrote. And I would encourage anybody in a season of grief to find ways that you can get things out of your head and get them out. If that's communicating with a friend, if that's a counselor, if that's your pastor, if that's providing that listening ear to somebody in that scenario. But really it was for me trying to articulate out what I was feeling. And those journalings that I did throughout the pregnancy, our time in the hospital after Noah passed, his memorial service, the months and years afterwards, they became the foundation of the book, my book, Even Though We Will. It became the foundation of that to try to share an insert into, this is something, again, don't speak for everybody, but this is something that I wish I would have had as a pastor. I wish I would have had this resource to know when somebody in the congregation was going through something. give me a glimpse into that. Because we looked across our friend group, right? We had this amazing friend group, amazing church community. No one had experienced this that we knew of. Nobody had experienced child loss. We had a distant friend that had had an early miscarriage, but no one had walked through this type of journey. There was not a lot of biblical truth out there around child loss at the time. This is 2019. There's a lot more resources now, thankfully. There was no playbook. There was no advice. There was no advice for our community of things to say and not to say, of how they could show up for our family. There was no advice for me as a dad, like, hey, these are some of the journeys that you're going to walk along. Here's some of the things that your bride is going to walk along. Here's the way you need to be attentive and show up for her. And so that was really the foundation for the book, is to share, like, here's what I wish I would have known along the way. Here's how our family navigated that. So, our son's name's Noah, and we play off of his story in the Bible a lot. The biblical story of Noah and the ark is amazing story. And one of the things that I love about the ark is it carried Noah's family through the storm. It did not remove the storm. And so in the book, every chapter ends in an ark, and it's just hey, here's an anchor. Here's a life raft that I needed in this part of the season that really helped me along the way. So that's kind of where the book came from.
Yeah, I love it. And even in the naming of your son, like, you kind of pulled that out as a pretty significant thing. And I kind of resonated with that, just because I've done some training with people on just even rediscovering the purpose and the meaning of their name. Yeah. And that's such a significant thing biblically, of whether you're whether people need a name change from like a Paul to a Saul, or Jacob to Israel, things of that nature, or just to be able to be called to live up to our name, right? Like a Gideon type of a person, where, just the angel shows up and says, you're a mighty man, mighty man of valor, right? And it's just the meaning of his name. And he doesn't feel like that at the time. But I love the significance of the meaning of the name that you guys had kind of chosen. And I think that you said in your story that after that ultrasound, maybe, of when things were kind of coming to a screeching halt in being able to move forward in this brand new season, you guys very quickly decided to name your child. Tell me a little bit about that, and then, because that plays into the obviously Noah and the ark, and just kind of everything carrying you forward from there. But what was that like?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, two things happened really early on. I had looked at, I'd had, it sounds silly in retrospect, but in my college years, there was an organization that I had served in a campus ministry role, and I wanted to serve as the president, and the board had picked somebody else to be president, and that was a big deal for me at that time, and it was a big, like, suffering moment of like, God, why would you take this away from me? I've been prepared for this role for a few years now, and I've got this vision that I think you would have for this organization. And so I remember going out and like flipping through my Bible and like, where can I read about suffering? This is 21-year-old Matthew, being melodramatic. And I came across Job, and I was like, that's a good story about suffering. I'm going to read Job. Man, I read through Job, and I got to chapter 38, and it was where God answers Job and his questioning, and it's a clarification of, where were you where I created the foundation of the world? Where were you when I told the oceans where to stop and the mountains where to rise? And I was just kind of accepted, like, okay, God, like, wow, you are God and I am not. And so I didn't realize that 8-9 years later, I'm going to be revisiting that passage and revisiting that as the faith of Job, to say, even though you slay me, yet will I praise you. Because I remember reading that in my early 20s and thinking, what incredible faith. Like, what incredible faith that he would have to declare that over himself. And I thought, I hope that I I will have faith that would stand that test. And so when we were in the waiting period between the first ultrasound appointment that we learned that he was sick to when we got the genetic testing, that kind of 10-day period, we said our family's mantra, the words that we were going to speak over ourselves, is even if we will. So even if this is what God allows to happen on our son, we will continue to praise him, that he is God and I am not. And his ways are higher than my ways and his thoughts are higher than my thoughts. And even when we didn't really know what it meant, we just said, this is the truth, and truth matters, and what we speak over ourselves matters. So we said, we're gonna say this over ourselves over and over and over again. This is gonna be our family mantra during this. When we learned of his diagnosis, we said, okay, it's now even though. It's no longer if. That this has become a fact, that this is the diagnosis that we have. And we're going to pray for healing. We're going to pray thousands of times between September and March for my son to be healed. There will be thousands of people praying for him. And the network that got out, the word got out to some amazing organizations. And there were people all around the world praying for our son, which is unbelievable. And we made this distinction to say, even though we will. And that just became kind of our family's battle cry, our mantra. This is the truth that we're going to speak over ourselves, number one. And number two, we were looking at names, and we looked at Noah, and we said, okay, Noah means rest. And Noah means that we can find rest and comfort and safety in the midst of suffering, in the midst of tragedy, in the midst of chaos, in the midst of all things feel like they're coming apart. We can find rest because our God is the same today as he was yesterday, as he will be tomorrow. He is never changing. And even though our circumstances have changed, his character has not. And so those two kind of things, we really in tandem kind of came together. And it was just a way for us to say, this matters. And the way that we navigate this next season in our life matters a lot.
Yeah, I love, goodness, man, there's so many good things, so many different directions to kind of go. I'm kind of curious of, obviously an 18-month-old isn't necessarily going to be able to grasp the reality of everything that's kind of going on. Like, I mean, it was 2 by the time he was born.
Yeah.
Or give or take.
He was 2.
And so,
he was 2.
So I have a 2-year-old right now, about 2.5. And so I'm just thinking of the things that he can comprehend and can't comprehend. And it's probably more than what we think. But at the same time, I'm curious as to, I mean, because you have multiple other boys as well.
Yeah.
3 other kids, is that correct?
Yeah.
Tell me how just this story and the way that you describe your family and how you help your other boys kind of understand maybe what's missing currently out of your family, or even if that's the wrong language to use. Like what does that look like in your home right now? Just, because your other boys are how old currently?
Yeah, so we have an 8, 5, and 3-year-old at home. And so some of the language that I've learned to talk about is the way I introduce myself. I have 4 sons. I have an 8-year-old, a would-be 6-year-old, 5-year-old, and 3-year-old, right? Because what I learned real quick, Andrew, is I can go into the grocery store. So this happened. This happened to us in April of 2020. So we're a month out from burying my son. We're in the midst of COVID. It is chaos. And we're getting groceries, and the person behind the counter that's helping kind of bag our groceries in a very sweet, innocent way says, Mom and Dad, when are you going to give him a baby brother or baby sister? And we just said, you know what? We're working on it. And we didn't say anything else, nothing else. Because in the moment, what I can do is I can crush her, right? I can absolutely crush her. But that's not my heart. My heart is not to do that. My heart is to honor my son. And so we try to, as a couple, what we learned, there's a lot of grace that has to be extended in the marriage, right? We got pulled aside at one of our doctor's appointments. One of the guys that very generously endorsed the book, and he's our palliative care. He's the head of the NICU, the neonatologist, I think is his official title. And he pulled me aside and he said, "Hey, Matthew, how's your marriage?" And I said, "Well, Dr. Cron, I think it's pretty good. High school sweethearts, best friends for a long time. We love each other really well. We're hurting, but we're doing okay." And he said, "Well, I've been doing this 35 years, and this goes one of two ways every time. And this will either drive you together or it will drive you apart. There is no in between. So you need to know that the road that you're walking down, it's going to mark you, and you need to be prepared for that." And so that was a gift that he gave us, gave me specifically as a man, of like, "Hey, buddy, like, you can be a doofus a lot of times, like I can be, but you're leading in your family, and you need to know that in the midst of your suffering, there are days coming on the other side of this cloud that you're in, and Lord willing, there will be decades with you and your wife and your other kids. And so the way that you show up really, really matters. The way that you show up as an individual, like it matters. You need to talk to somebody. You need to work on yourself. You need to read. You need to write. You need to worship. You need to find a way to accept the circumstances that are going on in you." And so that was something that we had to do. I had to do that a lot for my sons. We were given a book. I still don't remember who sent it to us. We got a lot of those kind of stories where people very generously just gave with no expectation of return, no really ability for us to even know, honestly. And somebody gave us this book. It's called The Rabbit Listens. I reference it in my book. It's a kid's book that is helping acknowledge loss in a child. So the rabbit listens, a little boy builds a tower, all of these, the wind knocks it over, all of these animals come through, they tell the little boy how to feel and what he should do. And then we come to the end of the story, and it's this little rabbit, and he comes up and he sits by the boy. He just sits there. And the little boy eventually looks over at the rabbit and says, "I'm really sad that my tower fell over." And the rabbit says, "I know that was probably really hard. Would you like help rebuilding it?" And they rebuild the tower together. I see that modeled in Job's life, right? Going back to Job, extreme suffering, has friends come to suffer with him, grieve with him. The first part of their journey is great. They sit with him, they mourn with him, and then they open their mouth. And then they try to tell Job what to do and how to feel and how to interact with God. Not what we're called to do. We should be there with them. And so I've tried to model that with my sons. I've tried to model not being okay and expressing how I'm feeling, as weird as that is as a dad. As a man, to talk about feelings, I try to model that a little bit better for my boys. I try to articulate the way that I'm feeling. I try to ask better questions. I try not to always give a lot of answers. And then I try to give them my presence. So I have the opportunity to speak all over the country, and I talk a lot about this idea of we show up, we listen, and then we deploy. So often grief is hard, obviously, but it's isolating because people don't know what to do. They don't know how to interact. They don't know the right thing to say or not say. They're afraid of saying the wrong thing. And I promise you, that person that's grieving, they're longing for somebody to come sit with them. They are. They're longing for human connection because their grief has isolated them. Their grief has made them feel like they're the only ones in the world that's going through this, and no one else knows what it's like. While their story is unique, right? Their story is unique to them. No one else has ever walked in their exact shoes. There are experiences that we go through that allow us windows into somebody else's story. and it allows us to connect. That's what empathy should be. It shouldn't be a tool that I beat you over the head with, just like that lady at the grocery store, right? I don't beat you over the head and say your story doesn't matter. I want you to listen to my story. No. I can take my story, the loss of my son, and I can connect with people deeply on an empathetic level that I can help lead them and encourage them and hopefully steward them closer to Christ. So in my life, I do that with my boys. I sit with them. I talk with them. We talk about our son, Noah. We talk about him all the time. We share about him. We share about what we remember about him. We share about his birthday. We celebrate his birthday. One of the things that we started several years ago is we let the boys pick out the cupcake combination, which is just something fun. The flavors are getting more crazy as we go further down the road, but it's something sweet that we get to do. I've taken all of my sons to Noah's graveside. I've had an opportunity to talk to them about death, about loss, and about God's goodness. And that we believe unapologetically that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God, and he is my Savior. And I believe that my son Noah is in his presence, that he died here in his earthly dad's arms, and he went into his heavenly Father's arms. And as David said, I will go to him, he will not return to me. And so we lean into that a lot as a family. And we, again, the words that we speak over ourselves matter. And so we really try to speak truth and help our sons with asking better questions.
Such a strange gift to be able to help your family just kind of navigate and kind of understand that some of that stuff really, really early. It was something that I never had to really encounter. Hadn't ever lost anybody super close until much later in life, much beyond the age of 2, that's for sure. But I, even in ministry, hadn't had a lot of opportunity to engage people like this until maybe 15 years ago or so, and had a young couple that was about my age at the time. We had just had one kid. I think my wife was maybe pregnant with our second, or had just had our second. And there was another couple in our church who just had a horrible experience, and in the birthing room had found out that when they gave birth that it was a stillborn.
Wow.
And like
Wow.
an appointment the previous week, everything looked fine,
Yeah.
all was good, and then go into the delivery room, and then immediately when baby comes out, it was just chaos from their perspective. And
Sure.
so it just had a stillborn immediately, and so it was just this expectation and joy immediately just kind of crushed on its head, probably very similar to some of what you experienced. But I remember not really feeling prepared or equipped,
Sure.
being much younger in ministry, to be able to navigate conversations around some of that type of stuff. And how do we come alongside them? How do we navigate that? And obviously their life group that they were a part of was tremendous in that season. But then I also remember a year or 2 later, when they got pregnant and were heading to like deliver their next child, of just the anxiety that I felt towards their family going into that. Everything was great. Kids still happy and healthy. I'm like probably 10 years old at this point, but it was just the anxiety and just the uncertainty that I remember feeling as a pastor of just, I don't really know what to do, what to say. And I'm not naturally, kind of people oriented anyway. I'm just very, process oriented, thought driven, and things of that nature. But it was just that moment of realizing I feel ill-equipped as to how to engage at this level. And I've always felt and resonated with those pastors who are like, yeah, you don't want me by your bedside in the hospital. I'm just not good in those environments. I like getting stuff done and doing driving and things like that, and I'm dotting the I's, crossing the T's, and making stuff happen, but I'm not great in that environment. And so I know that there's a lot of personalities kind of similar to mine, but at the same time, for people that are really adept at doing that type of stuff, and even not, just being able to, just like the rabbit listens type of scenario, where it's, you don't have to have all the answers. Just your presence is significant.
It matters so much, man. So I had our senior pastor, dear friend of mine, mentor of mine. I've known him for, gosh, 18 years now. And I cherish him. And one of the gifts that he gave me during this season as my pastor is he called me and he said, "Hey, Matthew, I'm going to take you to lunch and I'm going to come pick you up. I'm going to take you to lunch. You're not going to pay and we're going to hang out." And I said, "Okay." I didn't have to plan anything. We go to lunch a lot, right? I knew the spot we were going. There was some familiarity there. But we rode in the truck and he said, "I want you to know that I always want to hear about Noah. Always. This is a safe place for you to share about Noah. This is a safe place for you to share about how you're feeling, whether it's right or wrong. That's not what this place is for. It's just for you to share. It doesn't have to be well articulated. I'm not going to video it, put it out on the internet. I'm not going to share a prayer request in the Wednesday night Bible study that, oh my word, I got this guy and he's got crazy thoughts. I'm not doing any of that. I just want you to know I'm here. And I always want to know about Noah, but I'm not always going to ask you because I don't want you to feel the burden of that every time we hang out. So if you want to talk about Georgia football, we're talking about Georgia football the whole time. If you want to talk about hunting, if you want to go fishing, if you want to play golf, like I'm here. I will invite you to things. I will continue to hold you close, right? The definition that I love of accountability that I've been kind of crafting over the last few years is I want to care enough to hold you close and call you higher. I'm not trying to find you doing the wrong thing. I'm trying to help call you into what God's calling you to. And so he just gave me this incredible gift of like, I just want to give you my presence. So some days we're going to laugh. Some days we're going to cry. Both of those are okay. Some days we're going to not talk about him at all. We're not going to talk about how you're feeling. We're not talking about the family. We're going to talk about superficial things just for you to have an outlet to talk. And then other times we're going to kind of get into it. And I'm going to ask some more questions. I'm going to probe a little bit deeper because I care enough to hold you close and call you higher. And man, that was just the most incredible gift because everybody, when you walk through a season of profound grief, everybody walks on eggshells around you. And it's weird. It's just weird. Like people that are our pastor and his wife came over right before we had come back to church after Noah had passed. And they said, "We want you to know, like, you're welcome to come back anytime you want to. But like when you're ready, let me tell you something. You need to know that people are hurting. They're not hurting like you're hurting, but they're hurting. They're not going to know what to say. They're going to avoid you. They're going to run up and hug you and then leave. Or they may say something really stupid. I just want to prepare you right now. Like those three things are going to happen. You have done nothing wrong to cause any one of those three things. But that person that's grieving, they feel like they're the ones that's caused it. They feel like the black sheep immediately of like, what have I done to cause this disconnect with people around me? And so that's advice. And then another piece of advice I love to share. We were at a bereaved parents group. So they're an amazing organization to give a shout out to while we're waiting. Jill and Brad Sullivan, they're out of Arkansas, Hot Springs, Arkansas. It's a free weekend that they do all around the country. And they've got multiple countries, all around the country. They've got multiple countries they're serving in now. It's a Christian organization. They love the Lord, and it's a free weekend for bereaved parents. If you can just get to the event, it's free. So any of your audience that's listening to that, if they've got church members, incredible organization. We just went to that this past spring, my wife and I did. So we're 6 years out from our story, and we're still learning. You know, I've got a Noah-sized hole in my heart that will never be healed on this side of eternity. I'm still learning to love and to lead as a bereaved dad. But one of the things that we talked about at that group in that community setting is advice. Like, what's the advice we wished our community would have known? And one of the ladies there said, I wish that people would hear themselves say, at least, and then stop. Because normally on the other side of the word at least is something that is not helpful for somebody in the midst of grief, right? So let me tell you a couple of the at least that we got. At least you can have more kids. Okay, we can. Yeah, I got it. At least he's in a better place. At least he's no longer hurting. At least he's with God. At least you have time to have. I mean, it's just like at on and on and on and on. Are those things true? Yeah, they are. We did have more kids. Amazing blessing. I have 4 sons. Is he with God? Absolutely. There's so much that I treasure that my son is in the presence of his Savior. I treasure that. As a grieving dad, especially early on in your grief, that is not a truth that I need to be reminded of on a regular basis. That is not a helpful thing to communicate to me. There is a truth there, but it's not a way because it discounts the way that I'm currently feeling. It's a way to deflect, right? So as I'm saying, hey, Andrew, I see you hurting. Let me push you away from that hurt. Let me push you somewhere else, right? As the church in general, we don't grieve well. We don't allow ourselves to lament. We don't allow ourselves to go to the place of we're suffering and God is near to the brokenhearted and he rescues them. It is okay if our people are brokenhearted. They have a Savior that will rescue them.
Yeah, man. So as you're talking through just some of the equipping things of recognizing that empathy is not a weapon, it's a tool of recognizing, there's a slew of things not to say, right? I mean, like I know exactly what you're feeling, or like the at least types of phrases. But even as it occurs to me as you're talking through almost the expectations of what is to come from pastoral counsel to you as you guys are navigating your grief, of just saying, hey, people are going to act like this around you, and being able to, as from like a pastoral perspective, being able to offer that. What was that in particular? Did that just make it okay for you? You kind of describe it as very helpful in how
it's just a
just
resource, right? It's the resource to say people are crazy, but
Yeah.
people are we're all deeply flawed. We're all deeply broken. We're all in need of a Savior. No one can say something that brings your son. People aren't okay with that. People want to know the right thing to say. We so often want to be the hero. We want to be the one that makes it all better. We struggle with that if we're honest with ourselves in ministry, right? We get into this role and like, man, I can make this incredible impact. I can have this huge influence. All of it's true. We get way more caught up in what we can do rather than what God can do. And we end up putting our foot in our mouth way too much. But that advice for Hannah and I was just a kind of a culture shock to say, you're kind of walking around like nuclear toxic waste and people just don't know how to handle you. That will wear off, but for a period of time, that's going to kind of be there. And so the way that I handle that now, whenever I know somebody's walking through a season of grief, whether it's a loved one who's made a stupid decision, whether it's a loved one who's just got a difficult diagnosis, whether it's they've lost a job, a family member's lost a job, like there's all types of loss. It's not just infant loss, all types of loss that we experience. Loss is a universal truth that everyone goes through. I acknowledge it. I just come out and say, hey, I know that your family's going through this, just like my pastor did for me. I know that you're going through this. It does not change my opinion of you. I want you to know that I love you. I'm here for you. Anytime you want to talk about it, I'm willing to talk about it. But I'm not going to continue to bring it up. I'm not going to try to talk around it in weird ways, right? I want you to be able to have a safe place to talk. that's the way that I handle that now. And then I have learned that people, specifically in loss, like separation. So a child has died, a parent has died, a spouse or a sibling has died. Those people long to talk about them, right? Like, I long to talk about my son Noah. I love to talk about him. I have 3 other amazing boys that are home. I get to watch them grow. I get to see and interact with their friends and their parents. I get to have people ask me questions about them. Hey, what's Walker into? Is he liking this sport? Is he liking this activity? Hey, is Warren still being crazy? He's our 4th at home, or he's our 3rd at home. He's our Georgia Tornado. He's wild. We love him. Hey, is Abel do it? Whatever it may be, right? That we have this amazing ability to invite people to share about their loved one, and we can listen, right? It's about asking better questions than having better answers. And so when I learn of somebody that's had a loss in the conversation, I try to get to the question, hey, will you tell me about so-and-so? I would love to get to know them. I'd love for you to tell me about them. And then just kind of sit back and listen and ask some additional questions, right? That what a way to minister to someone's heart that is suffering, that's longing to be reunited with that loved one. And now I get to open up the joy of this life that they got to share. Maybe it was a long life, maybe it was a very short life, but they got to share time with this person. And now they get to reminisce, they get to process, they get to articulate the way that those emotions that they feel, that they made them feel, all of those things. So that's what I push for in the way that I help now.
Yeah, one of the key phrases that kind of stood out to me in the book was the idea that redemption does not erase the darkness; it enters it.
Yeah.
And there's a hope that kind of comes out of a story like this. And I was reminded, I went through the perspectives course, like the perspectives on the world Christian mission. And it was just this idea of interviewing so many different missionaries and just learning about all these different ways that the gospel has advanced all across the nations. And one guy came in to speak who shared his story about going into Mongolia and reaching unreached people groups. And one of the things that he talked about was it was his family and another family, and they had just had a child. And then a few months in, maybe a year into the child being born, died of SIDS. And
Wow.
and they expressed how when they were going into this unreached group, the gospel just felt like it was just kind of hitting a wall with so many different people. And it wasn't until the death of their child and the people in the country viewed this couple differently because they grieved with hope. And that was something so foreign to them that it really unlocked a lot of the gospel movement that kind of took place. And I'm curious, not just to reaffirm just that story, but I'm just curious in just how redemption has stepped into this darkness in your life, and just the problem of sin and death and things like that. What has God done through just this testimony? I mean, I know that you guys have done so many different things, started ministries and different things, but can you share just any stories that has just kind of come out of just because of everything that's kind of taken place?
Yeah, so I can share a few, and I'll try to be brief. There have been, it's amazing the weight that the story carries, and the way that I'm able to articulate it, that there's a hope. The goal that I have is that people will know there's hope in the midst of their suffering, because they have a risen Savior that they can serve, that He loves them, that He died for them, that His grace and His mercy are sufficient for them. And in that our testimony is something that is a beautiful truth in our life because it's God's work in and through us. And so what it does is it cannot be discounted. It can be ignored, but it cannot be discounted, right? This is my testimony. This is the story that I walked through. So who are you to tell me I didn't walk through it? I walked through this. This is my testimony. This is the work that Jesus has done in my life. I write about in the book, the foundational arc. Like the only reason that Hannah and I are standing, that we're still married, that we are continuing to live is because of Jesus and him alone. And so I get to share that with bereaved parents. I get to share that with parents that have received that difficult diagnosis. They've received a terminal diagnosis for their child. Maybe they're close to God, maybe they're far from God. I get to ask better questions now because I know a lot better questions to ask. I get to share about my son Noah. And in that, I get to offer some encouragement in pointing them back to the ultimate comforter, the peace that surpasses all understanding, right? The Prince of Peace. I get to point them back to that. It's not me. I'm not the one that did this well. It's Christ in me. So that's something that we've done from early on, that we would get connected to families. We would share a lot of those stories. I've got a podcast that I run. I have the opportunity to speak and to travel, and our businesses have won awards, and God's blessed them, and we've got incredible teams and great locations that we serve. And it's given me a platform to share about my son Noah. So there's a lot of redemption there. It's a lot of allowing people to not be okay. It's a lot of breaking down the facade of everything has to be put together and put together well. It's also a reality check on this is not a health, wealth, and prosperity gospel. That is not the gospel. Because in this life, we will have trials, we will have tribulations, but we can take heart for he has overcome the world. John 16:33, right? We were promised that. So we don't teach that because when we face trials, if we're taught that it's going to be a health, wealth, and prosperity gospel, then people abandon the faith because they think, well, God's abandoned me because this is not what I was taught. Then, Andrew, what's been really cool is on the corporate side, right? I love the sneaky Jesus perspective, right? I get to go into boardrooms. I get to go on conference stages, and I get to share. And I get to share a lot of biblical truth. And I get to share a hope that our Savior provides in rooms that normally are pretty hostile to that. I'm not saying I'm persecuted. I'm not trying to belittle somebody who's in a, like you're going to get arrested or your head cut off or any of those kind of things.
Yeah.
But I get into rooms that I've not been able to get into because of my son Noah. And it's amazing to see God go into the worst thing that we've ever been through. The hardest, the darkest, the deepest, and provide redemption. That he stepped right into that. And he said, like, hey, this is going to be an incredible mantle of grace in your life. And it will be an incredible testimony for your good and for my glory, for God's glory. That we are living in that. And while I wouldn't ever want to walk through it again, I am so appreciative of the intimacy that I have with my Savior, with my sons, and with my bride that I would not have if I had not navigated that with my son Noah.
Yeah. Well, dude, I'm so grateful for just the opportunity to connect with you and just learn a little bit more of your story. And just blessed by Noah and his story. praying that, just continued fruit and just the ability to speak into so many different leaders' lives, whether it's in the marketplace or in ministry, of just helping people learn how to navigate this and come alongside those who are grieving is significant, man. So that I've been blessed by, just being able to engage with your book, the Even Though We Will book, and just re-looking at some of the things that I've heard many, many times, but just the realness of the story and the pain that you guys have felt and articulated is,
thank you.
Continuing to help people grow. So appreciate that, man. Any last advice, thoughts, encouragement that you would give to pastors just kind of walking with people?
Yeah, the people in your church need community, and we all know that. We know that on the surface level. But someone in the season of loss and grief, they need people. Don't allow the enemy to distract them and turn them inward. Surround them with people around them. Create a process. Create a system. Work with your elders, your deacons, your leadership team. Create in your volunteers, a way to tangibly love on people and show up for them. Don't allow them to try to navigate this alone. If you're walking through a season of grief, if you're listening to this and you find yourself in that season, do not do this alone. You were not designed to do life alone. There are people in your life that love you. There are people in your life that want to be there for you. There's amazing people in this organization that want to be there for you. Reach out to Andrew and his team. Like, there are ways that you can be loved on and served. Do not try to do this alone.
Yeah, it's good, man. Appreciate you and all that you guys do. If anybody wants to connect or go deeper, man, with you or your resources, where can they find you at?
Yeah, so you can find the book on Amazon. You can find it on our website, eventhough-we-will.com. You can find me on MatthewEfird.com, EFIRD. It's like bird, but EF. So MatthewEfird.com. I'd be honored to connect and serve, speak and train at conferences all over the country. I'd be honored to help.
Awesome. Appreciate you, man.
Thanks for
your
your
time.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for checking out the Nexus Church Planting Podcast. We hope this conversation was helpful and inspires you to lean deeper into your calling. If you want to learn more about Nexus, visit us at nexus.us. There, you'll find church planting resources, upcoming trainings, events, and more. We also want to encourage you to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Leave a review or rating to help others find us. And please share this episode with someone you know, a pastor, a leader, a friend, somebody who needs to hear this conversation. And until next time, move with vision, lead with courage, and multiply the kingdom.